So let's now replace this text widget with the actual widget that should be shown in this modal bottom sheet. And for this, I'll add a new file because this widget, which I want to show in this bottom sheet, will be this form, this combination of input elements that can be used by the user to describe a new expense. And since I'll have a couple of widgets there and some logic attached to them, I want to move that to a new file. So here I'll create a new file in that widgets folder, which I'll name new_expense.dart. So that's my file name. And in there, we want to create a new class, the new expense class, which of course extends a widget class. And here it'll be the stateful widget, since I will need to manage some internal state here in the future. So therefore here we're extending stateful widget. We need to add the createState method here, and of course the constructor function for this new expense widget. And at the moment here, I'll just accept and forward the key argument. And then we add this second class that's always added to your stateful widgets, the underscore new expense state class, which extends state, which is linked to new expense like this. And here for the createState method, we can also replace stateful widget with new expense like this. And here in the new expense state class, we of course must add this build method. And here in createState, we have to return a new instance of new expense state like this. And here in the build method, we now of course have to return our combination of widgets that should define this form, which can be used by the user to enter the expense data. For that, I'll return a widget here, and I'll start by returning a padding widget, actually. Since I want to have some spacing around this form, so that it doesn't sit right on the edges of this modal bottom sheet. So here we add padding, and set padding to edge insets. And then here, for the moment, I'll set this to all 16. And I'll add the const keyword later once we finalized this widget combination and we know where exactly we can add it. So here I added my padding. Now we also must add the child argument and then of course define which widget should be wrapped with the padding. And in the end, in this finished form that should be shown on the screen, I'll have multiple rows of input elements, you could say. I have this title input element in the first row, and then in the second row I have the amount and the date input element, and then in the third row at the bottom I have this dropdown which can be used for choosing a category, and then next to it my buttons that can be used for canceling input or for submitting the input. And therefore, since we want to have multiple rows, it again screams for the column widget, and we can use column instead of list view here because we don't need scrollability right now, and we also don't need to generate those items dynamically. Instead, we know exactly how many rows we'll have, and therefore we're good to go. So with that, we can set our child widgets in this column. And I will start with the input field for the title of the expense that is about to be added. And for that, we can use the built-in TextField widget provided by Flutter, which will display such a text input element. Flutter has a bunch of built-in input elements. For example, later we'll also use the drop-down button for displaying this drop-down, but here it's TextField for allowing the user to enter some text. Now, the TextField widget has many parameters that can be set, many niche parameters, which you will rarely need, but also some very useful parameters, like for example the max length parameter, which you can use to set a maximum amount of characters that can be entered into this input field. For example, here for our expenses, we could say that the title of a single expense shouldn't be longer than 50 characters. And hence we can enter a value of 50 here. In addition, we could also set the keyboard type here to then use the built-in text input type enum, which is provided by Flutter, to control which virtual keyboard should be opened when the user taps into this text field. So that we, for example, open a keyboard that's optimized for entering email addresses or standard text, which is the default setting anyways though, and which we therefore don't have to set explicitly. And nonetheless, it is important to know about this feature. Now here for this text field, I don't need that, but I do want to add a label to the text field to tell the user which kind of value should be entered there so that the user doesn't have to guess. And the label can be added, and that's a bit strange, by setting the decoration parameter on the text field. So I guess you can think of this label text as kind of a decoration around the actual text input field. So decoration then wants an input decoration object created with the built-in input decoration class provided by Flutter. And input decoration offers a label property. So that's how you add a label to a text field. You set the decoration parameter to an input decoration object, and on that object you can set the label property. And label wants a widget, as you can see, so therefore here we can use the text widget, which is the widget you will typically use for such a label, to give this text field a label of title, for example. With all of that, we can add const here to get rid of the blue squiggly lines, and also add it here in front of edge insets all, and we should have such a text field. Now, this is not the final form. We'll add more to it later, and at the moment we're also not handling any input into this text field, but it's a first step, and I want to make sure that it's this form, this basic form here, that will be displayed in this bottom sheet when it's opened. And for that, of course, we have to go back to expenses, to this code where we open the modal bottom sheet, and instead of showing this dummy text widget here, I want to create my new expense widget instead. And we can add const in front of this here. With that, if we save this and I force a reload, if I open this again, you see this looks totally different now. Now it looks better, it occupies more space because of that column which we added in there, which automatically in the end tells Flutter to reserve more space for it. We got the padding around the text field, and of course, most importantly, we got the text field. And we got the text field with that label that we set and with a hint related to the max characters we set. And of course we can tap into it, and this soft keyboard should open up here, and we can use that to type, or here when using the emulator we thankfully can also use our physical keyboard to enter our title. So that's how we could enter a value here. Of course, at the moment we're not using that value in any way, and we also can't submit the form. So therefore, before we add any other input fields, let's make sure that we do instead save that entered value and that we can submit that form and add a new expense with that title.